This is the new DJI Avata 2, and these are the new DJI Goggles 3. And today, we're going to take a look at them. We're going to see what they bring to the table and what it means for people in the world of FPV drones. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today.
Sunset in every dawn. With you, my love, I feel reborn. In your embrace, I'm free to be forever yours, eternally.
Before we get into the review of this product, I got to get my normal sort of disclosure statement out of the way. And normally that is just some text down in the corner of the screen, but this is kind of a big one, so I want to make sure it doesn't get missed. Just like usual, I received this stuff from DJI. I didn't buy it with my own money, and I will be keeping it after the video is over. That's pretty much always true. I have not received any cash or other forms of compensation in exchange for this video. That's also pretty much always true. And DJI has not seen this video or had any feedback about this video and has not placed any prohibitions on what is not allowed to be in this video. What you see right here is the least amount of money you can spend to get into this kit, at least as of the time of release. It includes the DJI Avata 2 and a single battery, the DJI Goggles 3, and the motion hand controller. And I know there's people out there who are thinking that they don't like the motion hand controller very much, having used it on the DJI Avata 1. I've got to say that I think this works better than it did with the Avata 1, and we'll demo that later in the video, and you can judge for yourself. But if you do want the hand controller, you can get it. The Hand Controller 3 can be purchased separately and allows you to fly the Avata 2 like a normal drone. And yeah, I did say Hand Controller 3. They have introduced a new hand controller. It looks pretty much the same as the Hand Controller 2, except it's got an internal antenna. And no, at the time of release, this will not be compatible with the Hand Controller 2 if you already own it. Shocker, DJI is making you buy new gear, even though you bought gear in the last generation too. So what's the deal with compatibility? At the time of release, the DJI Avata 2 will not be compatible with any of the current FPV system equipment. The Goggles 2, the Goggles Integra, the Hand Controller 2, or the Motion Controller 2, although I'm not sure how many people even bought that thing. It is not compatible with any of that stuff. The paperwork that I got from DJI says temporarily incompatible, which suggests that at some point in the future they might make it compatible. But if you look back at the release of some of their previous systems, at time of release they were not backwards compatible, and then later it got added in a firmware, presumably after they'd hit some kind of sales goal for the equipment. However, the Goggles 3 are backwards compatible with the DJI Air 3 and the Mini 4 Pro at time of release. And if you're using the Goggles 3 with those drones and you already own the DJI Controller 2, then they will work. So we know it's possible. It's just a question of when they unlock it in firmware. And if one battery is not enough for you, you can buy this bundle, which includes the goggles, the drone, and the motion controller, as previously stated. But in addition, it includes this bag, which is actually kind of nice, and this 3 battery charger and 3 batteries. Let's take a look at some key differences between the previous generation of these products and the new generation. And we'll start with the goggles. And the first thing you're going to notice about the goggles is that they have a built-in battery pack here at the back of the head strap, similar to the DJI goggles Integra. An advantage of that is that it's pretty comfortable to wear. Like, you don't have a battery hanging off the side of your head, and you don't have a wire running down your body going to a battery in your pocket. That's cool, although the downside is that if you run out of battery and you need to change packs really suddenly, you can't just unplug a battery and plug a new one in. The goggles can be powered and charged via a USB power bank in the field, so if you need auxiliary power, that's how you're going to do it. There's another major difference that people notice, and it's funny to me watching people try to interpret the leaks, because they saw this forehead brace, whatever, and they thought that it meant that the goggles would flip up while you were using them. Sadly, that is not true. If I put the goggles on my face like so, you can see that they only come out that far. There's just not a lot of play in there. And what this is intended to do is it lets you put them exactly right against the front of your face, based on like where your forehead is and how far out your nose sticks and so on. And I've got to say, I wanted to hate this at first, but it kind of works, and it kind of works better than many FPV goggles. God forbid, I'm not suggesting that FPV goggles pick this up. But a lot of times the problem with FPV goggles and the DJI goggles in the past has been that they just don't fit everybody's face perfectly. And people often try and solve this by putting different goggle foam, thicker foam, thinner foam, trying to get it to fit their face and avoid pressure points. And what DJI have done is they have focused on the one part of everyone's face that is more or less consistent, the forehead. Like, pretty much everybody's got a forehead, and it's pretty much big and flat. And they put the majority of the pressure and the weight of the goggles there on the forehead, and then let you just adjust the exact placement of the goggles up against your face to try to get rid of light leak without actually pushing any pressure, like on your nose or on your eye sockets or anything like that. It kind of works. I hate it, but it kind of works. Another really cool change that DJI has made is that the propellers are now mounted using standard T-mount style, well, standard for FPV enthusiasts, standard T-mount style mounting. So you've got these two M2 screws that go through the top, and that means that if you want to put aftermarket propellers on here, you should be able to without any wacky adapters or any custom machining. That's kind of cool, although there are people who will miss the sort of quick mount style of props that DJI usually does. Here's the USB port on the Avata, and it's going to be way more useful than it was on previous versions of the drone. You see, a lot of people didn't use the internal storage on the drone for 2 reasons. Number 1, it wasn't very big, it filled up quickly, and number 2, it wasn't very fast to get the data off of it. The drone now has 46 gig of internal memory. That's enough to record for I'm not going to pull out my calculator. It'll record for a long freaking time. If you need more storage, you can put an SD card in, and you can have all, whatever, gigabytes and gigabytes of storage for your 4K recordings. Yay, you cinematographer. Let's fire it up and take a look inside the goggles at the new menu system. We'll cover some of the new features, and we'll cover how the hand controller can be used in augmented reality mode. Here's the DJI Fly app running on my phone, and it's connected to the goggles via a USB connection. And if I just hit Go Fly, then I can see on my phone screen exactly what I would be seeing inside the goggles. If I then pick up this hand controller, you can see that by moving the hand controller, I'm moving this augmented reality cursor inside the goggles. Now, as I move it around the screen, you can see little menus wanting to pop up, but unfortunately they will not pop up via the hand controller unless I'm actually wearing the goggles. So right now, looking at the phone screen, I can go to this joystick here on the goggles and I can access the menus, but I can't do the cool augmented reality stuff, which I totally want to do. So I'm going to put the goggles on right now. And as I put the goggles on, I will just adjust the focus adjustment. The goggles have focus adjustment from +2 to -6. Those of you with perfect vision, good for you. Personally, My vision is actually slightly worse than -6. It's like 625 to 675. And the DJI Goggles 2 had adjustable focus up to -8. I don't need corrective lenses with the Goggles 2, but I kind of can't quite get these fully in focus. Like, it's usable, but it's not as good as it could be. And in case you're wondering, well, do any of the aftermarket lenses for the Goggles 2 work on these? It doesn't look like they fit. No. So I just have slightly worse focus than I should, but I can pretty easily move this on my forehead to get it lined up as perfectly as I can. Hold on a second. Let me just turn this knob here to raise. There we go. Raise the gimbal. Hey, how you doing? So here inside the goggles, I can bring up the main goggle menu, and I just want to show you some highlights here for some things that I think you're going to want to see. If we go into status, then we can see RemoteID functionality normal. Yes, the drone does broadcast remote ID, as is required by law for all drones sold in the United States past whatever the cutoff date was. Yes, the goggles do have GPS inside and detect your GPS location, and the drone can broadcast the pilot your location. Here in the transmission settings, we can see something very interesting. I have set the channel mode to manual, and you can see that the frequency can be either 2.4 or 5.8 gigahertz. This is really cool because although the Avata 1 did do both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, it only used 2.4 gigahertz for the control link. It didn't do video over 5 gigahertz. I'm gonna take these off after all. It's kind of annoying having the cable dangling there. You've seen the AR joystick, right? We'll see that more again when we take it out to fly. The advantage of 2.4 gigahertz is that being lower frequency, you get more range and penetration out of it. The disadvantage of 2.4 gigahertz is that it's a very small frequency band. You can basically only get one channel in it. But if you're flying by yourself, you can now use 2.4 gigahertz for video and get even better range and penetration. And if you're flying with a bunch of other pilots who aren't flying DJI up in the 5 gigahertz band, you can fly down in 2.4 gigahertz and not stomp on them. Now, I haven't tested that myself. I'm going to leave that to somebody like Mads Tech, who does a lot of really good testing of that kind of spectrum analysis stuff. But theoretically, at least, you can put this device down in 2.4 gigahertz and not blast people who are operating in 5 gigahertz, get better range and penetration. It's just a win-win-win. The other thing you're going to notice is right here, the bandwidth is set to 60 megahertz. And that's a big deal because the more megahertzes you have, the better your image is going to look. Previous DJI systems used either 40 megahertz, which is 50 megabits per second, 20 megahertz, which is 25 megabits per second, or 10 megahertz, which is 12.5 megabits per second. The 60 megahertz is even more megabits per second. I believe DJI quotes it at 60 megabits per second, and that should give us even better image quality. The downside, it's going to take up more space in the spectrum, and you're going to have fewer channels available. If we go here in 2.4 gigahertz, we can see we only have one channel to choose from. If we go up to 5 gigahertz, we can see that we still only have one channel to choose from. But if we change, oh, it hasn't been unlocked, has it? We're going to do the ham unlock. Good news. The exact same ham unlock procedure for the Goggles 2 and the Integra has just worked on the Goggles 3. And that means that now, if I go into transmission, I have access to all the channels. And you can see here that in 60 megahertz mode, we still have 3 channels available in 5.8 gigahertz. That's the same as 40 megahertz mode, but presumably we're taking up more of the frequencies and interfering more with other pilots who might be in the area. If we go down to 2.4 gig, what do we got? Just one channel available. That's what I thought, because it's a much narrower frequency band. You know what? I think we've been looking at the menus long enough, and it's time we actually took this outside and flew it. Before we do that, I want to show you up close how the hand controller works, because it's a little bit non-intuitive, and to be honest, it turned out to be way cooler than I actually thought it was going to be. I know there's people out there who've flown the hand controller with the FPV drone and the Avata 1 and who are kind of down on it. And I gotta say, it probably wouldn't be my first choice as an experienced RC pilot, but it does make certain kinds of moves a lot easier for someone to do, especially someone who maybe isn't used to flying an RC drone. And the first thing I want to show you is that as I raise and lower my hand, the gimbal tracks that motion. So we have the ability to look up and down with a single axis gimbal without the drone itself having to pitch up and down. If I click this joystick to bring up these options, I can also bring up head tracking. And if head tracking is on, then as I move, now not only is the gimbal moving up and down, but literally the drone is tracking my head as I move it. You can hear the motors freaking out. If I just half press the trigger here, then the motion control will activate, and I can turn the drone left and right by tilting my hand left and right. And this hat right here makes the drone go up and down. It also, as you can see, activates the turning action, and if I push it left and right, the drone will slide to the left and right. As far as front and back goes, the way it works is, as soon as I half press the joystick, that little circular reticle appears on screen, and in addition to moving the drone and gimbal to look at it, the drone will also steer towards it. So if I just begin to pull the trigger, the drone will start moving forward, and I can fly it wherever I want to go. And what I find so fascinating about this hand controller is like how it sort of tricks you into feeling like the drone is moving in ways it's not. Like it's banking kind of like a fighter plane, but then when we go into a sharp descent, it's not pitching forward like an FPV drone. It's using the gimbal to look up and down. So it has this control over its speed that you just don't get. Just don't get with an FPV drone. You can't get a shot like this with an FPV drone where you're looking down, but also kind of not just diving. It's really pretty easy to fly and pretty cool. And it's really hard to get shots like this where you look up and go up and then you swoop down with a hand controller. It would be really hard to move the gimbal that smoothly. You could use the head tracker, I guess. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. We've let off the stick, and boom, just stops. If you're gonna crash, just let off the stick, it stops. So what about if we press the flight mode button and we switch to sport mode? Okay, here we go, sport mode. In 3, 2, 1, go. So it's going a little faster now. Oh, it's going way faster. You really have to practice paying attention to how your hand is tilted. It's easy at first to kind of lose track of where you're aiming and have the drone climb or descend when you didn't intend it to. But you can see that with a little practice, we can really just, oh God, oh God, oh God. Oh, point not made. I was gonna say, you really could just zip it around. Boom, I crashed it, oh well. Now, if you do crash and your quadcopter's upside down, then you won't be able to take off again. But DJI have a fix for that as well. It's called turtle mode, and it's something that FPV drones have had for a long time. In order to activate turtle mode, you don't use the controller. Instead, you just, well, it's DJI. You just let the drone do it on its own. Here in the menu, we're going to go to Settings, we're going to go to Control, and we're going to go down to turtle mode. And if I just click on the button there, well then, Mr. Smarty Pants, what if an obstacle is blocking one of the props? Just kidding. I'll have to be more aggressive. It did it! It says propulsion system error, but it correctly identified that one of the motors was jammed, and it flipped the other direction, and the stick came out. Now let's try out the traditional hand controller. And there we go. And before I do that, I'm just going to use this knob right here to set a certain up tilt angle, like 15 degrees or something. And I'm basically going to leave that locked in because it's not easy to change that while you're flying. Yes, you can adjust the knob. It's just not going to be very smooth. You've also got this 3 position that takes you from all the way down to 0 to all the way up, which, okay, but like, well, let's see what it looks like. Here we go, 15, 18 degrees. And of course, we're immediately gonna go to sport mode. And away we go. And like, it's fine, but it just lacks a lot of that smoothness that we had, especially when climbing or descending with the motion controller. Like if I come around here and try to climb, it's not gonna look up. And if I come over the trees here, it's not looking down. Like, how am I gonna see what I'm descending into? I can't. The motion controller just handles that way more smoothly. It would be really good if we could activate head tracking. This has head tracking, but it only works with the hand motion controller. It would be really great if we could activate head tracking so that while flying with the control sticks, I could also manipulate the gimbal with my head, but it just can't do that. While I'm flying, one thing you may not know is that right now, this bank that you're seeing, where I'm banking into the turn, the drone's doing that for me automatically. Like, I'm just steering with the left stick and it's banking and handling the turn automatically. If I really want to rip it around, I'm gonna put it in manual mode. There we go. We are in full Acro manual mode, just like an FPV drone. And to be honest with you, like, obviously this isn't the best flying FPV drone I've ever flown, but it really impresses me. Like, it's not a ton of like prop wash or bounce back. It's got a reasonable amount of power. Do you see how coming down out of there, it didn't kind of go whoop, 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 or lose control? Pretty freaking smooth, to be honest with you. Pretty freaking smooth. That's the default rates. We can crank those rates up if we want to. That was a full stick deflection. But it's a FPV drone. Let's see if we can find the limits. Full throttle. There we go. So like, if I really push it, it does get out of sorts. But we can really whip this thing around. Surprising amount. And there we go. I found the limit there. It jerked just a little bit. It's surprisingly capable. And as long as you stay sort of within its limits, it flies surprisingly well. Like, I think that there's quote-unquote FPV cinewhoops out there that don't acro this well, or maybe acro about this well. For those who can't do acro tricks in manual mode, DJI has what's called Easy Acro. Now this only works when using the hand controller. You go into the goggle menu and activate Easy Acro, and a new menu appears at the side of the screen. And from here you can choose what trick will be done when you press the little hat joystick on the motion controller one way or the other. The default is the normal slide behavior where it moves left, right, up, down. But you can choose 180 drift or flip. Now, it's one thing to do these tricks in a big open field high up in the sky, but I decided to actually try to integrate them into some sort of freestyle-ish lines, and you can see the result here. Two of the things that held me back from that were, number one, you can't do the easy acro modes when you're too close to the ground. You need to be at least like, I think it's like 2 meters. But if you're too close to the ground, you can't do it. Which is interesting because the quad really doesn't lose any altitude. Like, it's doing these tricks extremely precisely. The other limitation was that you can't do them when you're in sport mode. You can only do them in normal mode, which is why I was going not as fast as I might. I feel like I would be doing a disservice to the feature if I didn't give you guys a closer look at how the head tracking works. Okay, do you see the circle on screen? That is where the hand controller is aiming. And you see the hand controller is not controlling the up-down motion of the gimbal anymore. Instead, now my head is. Do you see the crosshair on screen? That is where my head is aiming. And watch what that lets you do. So as long as the circle is on top of the crosshair, my head is centered up and the drone flies more or less like it did when I had tracking disabled. But I can start looking into turns and then bring my head back to center again. I can come around here, look into the turn. It's just so intuitive. I look up and I look over. And now I'm kind of doing an orbit move. And we'll go down. It really takes a lot of getting used to. I'm still sort of figuring it out myself. But like, you can do really complex moves that you couldn't do with the hand controller, not very easily. See, like I could do an orbit like this with the hand controller, but I couldn't easily look up like this in the middle of the orbit and then do that and really manipulate the gimbal. It really is like walking and chewing gum at the same time. Like I have to constantly be thinking of, oh, hang on, I'm getting away from me because I'm trying to talk and chew gum too. I have to constantly think about like where my head is and where my hand is, but I'm already like 5 times better at it than I was. See there, we look out of the turn as we come out and we look down. I'm already getting better at it, and I can just tell that with practice, you would be able to pull, come on baby, yes, right through the gap. You would be able to pull some really sick moves with a really, and look out of the turn, there we go. And now we're flying straight. You'll be able to pull some really sick moves. It just, oh, it got away from me again. It's really tricky, but come on, don't crash. Very cool at the same time. Oh God, look up, where is it? It's okay, center it up, there we go. Oh. Honestly, of the 3 different ways to fly this, obviously full manual is my favorite. I almost think for just fun cruising around, the motion controller is more fun for me than the sport mode. Because I'm so used to being able to look down and look up, and the motion controller approximates that more than in sport mode, where you're just kind of like, if I had to do precise flying, it would probably be in sport mode. The motion controller, it's just a little hard to kind of precisely put the drone where you want it, although that would come with practice. And if I was trying to make complex moves, the motion controller, it might be better, because with the motion controller, I can head track. And so if I'm trying to fly over here but look over there, I could kind of use head tracking to do that. I almost think some pilots are going to find the motion controller to be more capable of getting sort of vaguely complex cinematic moves than the hand controller. I think DJI could fix that. I really think they should make the head tracking work while you're using the hand controller, and that would be more of my favorite. What we're going to do now is we're going to do not a range test, because I'm not going to fly this out of visual line of sight, but somewhat of a range demonstration, and just see how our bit rate, we're at 60 megabits per second, and we're going to go this way. Doodly-doo. It is dropping. 30 megabits per second. 18. Okay. 15. Okay. Well, 4. Alright. What if I transmission frequency 5 gig? Can I just make that change real quick? And we'll go to channel 3 5 gig. We still recording? Oh wow, we are. Okay. Nothing else has changed. Let's see how we do. Let's go out this direction. It seems better. I think maybe there's interference on 2.4 gig in my area. Yeah, this is way better. Oh yeah. Got the home point there in screen. Always like that DJI does that. Yeah, so we're doing way better in 5 gigahertz than in 2.4 gigahertz, probably because there's like Wi-Fi near me blasting 2.4 gig. That's one advantage that 5 gig is going to give you over 2.4 gig, which is that 2.4 gig, you're basically taking up the whole band with that 60 megahertz transmission. 2.4 gig is about 83 megahertz wide, so that 60 megahertz is basically the whole thing, whereas with 5 gigahertz you have a lot more room to fit yourself in. Oh, hello. No, I'm losing it. I'm losing it. Okay. Climb, baby, climb. I'm just holding up on the stick, hoping it climbs. Climb, please. There we go. Ha! See, I started diving down to get a closer look at that car. I swear I wasn't going to chase the car. And it started breaking up, and I just released the stick and pressed up on the hat, and it started climbing and got itself back. Very nice. That reminds me. Here, come here. Come here, friend. Okay. So it does have downward facing proximity. Yeah. It's supposed to have rearward proximity. I don't think it does. No. It's got what looks like rearward facing cameras here, but they don't seem to be proximity sensors at all. Just downward. There you go. It's time to talk about what was supposed to be one of the most exciting features of the new Goggles 3, the live view, where you use these cameras on front of the goggles to see what's around you. And this was supposed to be super exciting because, like, number one, it would mean that you could just, like, real quick look at something, adjust something without having to lift the goggles up. It's just a convenience feature. But number two, it actually has built-in picture-in-picture where you can see the FPV view and the live view at the same time. But I think that it's not meant to be used in the way that, like, I first thought it was meant to be used. And in order to demonstrate that, let me go into the live view. You do that by double tapping on the touchpad, and boom, we're in the live view. And is this, oh, the live view doesn't output to the phone. You guys can't see what I'm seeing at all. Right now, my hands are right at the edges of the display that I see. So, like, that's it. That's how much field of view you get. It is so zoomed in. Like, if I wanted to walk around, I'd have to literally look down at my feet and look up. I have no peripheral vision at all. Cannot see my hands. 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 There they are. That's how much field of view I get. And I think the reason for that is that this real view feature is not intended for you to just walk around with your goggles on and, like, oh, real quick, tie your shoe, grab your controller, change your SD card. It's intended for you to maintain visual line of sight with the aircraft by looking at it. And in that respect, you want it to be zoomed in because the aircraft is going to be far away. You want to be able to see it. And that's cool. But, like, it doesn't, like, if you're thinking about the FAA visual line of sight requirement, it doesn't fulfill the FAA visual line of sight requirement, which explicitly requires unaided eye. You're allowed to have corrective lenses, and that's it. A camera view or something like this does not count, according to the FAA. So it's practical, I guess, but it's not what I was originally thinking of. And, like, it would be nice if it was wide angle, and then you could, like, zoom it in if you wanted to. Because I've had goggles before with pass-through video. Sky Zone goggles used to have it. And it was kind of cool to not have to, like, lift your goggles up and then do that. You could just boop real quick, go do something, and boop back in again. It's not completely useless, but the first time I used it, I was like, I cannot believe how zoomed in this is. This is pointless. Like, at least the goggles, like, rest on your forehead, so they're easier to lift up and down, I guess. I'm just going through this feature list that DJI gave me, comparing the Avata 1 to the Avata 2 to make sure there's nothing I've overlooked. The Avata 2 has a 1/1.3 inch sensor compared to a 1/1.7 inch sensor for the original Avata, so larger image sensor, presumably better image quality. It has, oh, I see. The backwards facing sensors are not proximity sensors. They're for visual positioning. So therefore giving it accurate positioning information, like when it's indoors and doesn't have GPS, or improving positioning when it's outdoors and close to the ground. It's not just looking straight down, but it's also looking back to that. Oh, that gives it some vertical. Oh, that's smart. I see. See, I'm glad I read this. If you're just looking down, then you get horizontal positioning, but you have no positioning information about your altitude. If you are looking both down and backwards, then you get positioning information about your altitude, and that probably makes the altitude hold more accurate when you're indoors. Very interesting. 23-minute flight time for the Avata 2 compared to 8-minute flight time for the Avata 1. That about jibes with what I've seen, although most of the flights I've been doing, I've been hooning it pretty hard, so my flight times haven't actually been that long. Fast charge, power delivery fast charge on the Avata 2, so the batteries charge faster, and it's worth pointing out that they list the max transmission distance for the 04 as 13 kilometers compared to 10 kilometers for the 03. And although we haven't done a true range test because of beyond visual line of sight restrictions in the USA, that roughly jives with what I've seen. It seems like the video on the 04 or the range of the 04 is just a little better than the 03. The 03 was way better than the Vista, but it's not like a night and day difference. I wonder if this means that DJI is coming to the end of their sort of ability to make huge leaps, and now they're just kind of slowly plateauing off until eventually they'll make another huge leap probably. But it's not this generation. Oh, and for those of you in Europe, the DJI Avata 2 is C1 certified. And I don't know what that means. It has to do with what you can do with the drone legally. And I'm not a European, and I don't really keep up with that stuff. But it's a big deal because there haven't been very many, if any, C1 certified drones until now. And now there is one. So good for you, I guess. I just received the price list from my DJI contact for all of the things that will be available at release date and how much they're going to cost. And I'm going to show it to you in just a second. But before I show it to you, can I remind you that if you decide to pick up any of this, it would sure mean a lot to me if you use the links in the video description below. Those are affiliate links. I get a little commission every time you use them. And especially on a high ticket item like this, that little commission actually adds up. It sure does mean a lot. No requirement. Doesn't cost you anything extra. Just a little easy thing you can do to help support the work that I do here if you feel like it's worth supporting. So then, how much is all this going to cost? And more importantly, what are my final thoughts about who this is right for and whether you should get it? So the first thing on this list is the DJI Avata 2 drone only, which will be $489. However, DJI has told me that will not be available on release date. That will be available at some point in the future. Everything else you're going to see on this list is available, at least that's what I'm told, on release day, but some stores won't have all of it. Traditionally, the way this has worked in the past is most stores are going to have the combo, and then if you want individual onesie-twosie items, they're only available directly from DJI, at least in the beginning. So, the DJI Avata 2 Fly More combo with a single battery, $999, with 3 batteries, $1,199. If you want to pick up the remote controller, the hand controller with the sticks instead of the motion controller, that's going to cost you an extra $200. Yikes. That's a huge chunk of money. And I think a lot of people who are thinking about getting into this will be cross-shopping it against a traditional FPV drone. You can get into a traditional FPV drone with a good set of FPV goggles, heck, with a good set of DJI goggles for, I've just roughed in these numbers. There's obviously some flexibility here. You could save $100 here, $50 there, but come to roughly $1,250 for the DJI goggles Integra, a really good bind and fly drone with the 03 air unit, a hand controller in the $100 to $150 range. You could spend more, but you could spend a little less, and batteries and a charger. I just roughly tossed in $200 off the top of my head. So the pricing is pretty comparable. Obviously, you're going to be getting a very different experience with a traditional FPV drone. You're going to need to learn to fly it. And when you learn to fly it, it's going to be very, very capable in a way that the Avata 2 isn't. But the learning curve of getting to learn to fly it is, I think, going to be the deciding factor over whether you buy the Avata 2 or whether you decide to go a different direction. The person who should buy this kit is a person who really, really wants to fly the Avata 2 today. And it's the only way to do that. But you should not buy this kit if you are hoping that at some future date, it will be compatible with some piece of hardware that you already own. And I'm talking specifically to FPV pilots who are flying the DJI 03 air unit or the previous generation of air units and maybe thinking, oh, are the Goggles 3 the future for me? Well, first of all, I think you can see that for FPV pilots, the Goggles 3 don't add that much capability, except later when the 04 air unit releases on its own, which presumably it will, they will be compatible with it. And presumably the Goggles 2 and Integra will not be forwards compatible with it. Otherwise, why would you buy the Goggles 3? If you're going to buy the DJI Avata 2 and you want to learn to do the kind of acro tricks that you saw me doing in this video, not just the flip and roll that DJI can let you do automatically, but you want full control over the acrobatic abilities of a drone, you got to learn how to fly it in manual mode. And if you're interested in doing that, I have a whole How to Fly series of videos, a playlist. And the good news is you can start now. You can use this controller or any other controller. Shoot, you could use an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller if you've got it sitting around. Any computer game controller, but also the DJI RC controller if you happen to own it, and a simulator, and you can actually learn to fly in manual mode. And I'm going to put a card on screen with a link to that playlist, as well as a link in the video description below if you want to check out. If you're looking to learn to fly acro and really get the most out of it, I think this is one of the best ways to learn to fly. I'll see you there.